So, before I begin with a short foreword, I'm going to add an additional foreword before the actual foreword. I didn't want to delay any further in producing this series, but unfortunately my assets package, i.e. the recordings for Genealogy, are pretty incomplete. So, I'm going to take a page out of the Steam experience and release this part in early access. When I'm finished my recordings, I'll try to I will re-upload any parts that have been affected with more relevant gameplay examples. Nothing in the scripts or anything else is going to change. It's all in its final state, and I'll try to make this part the only one that gets this treatment. I apologize for the lack of gameplay footage that will be in here that is past Chapter 1. Just for this part, hopefully, and hopefully you're still able to enjoy it. Anyway, let's get started. Alright. So, before we begin the actual discussion, we need to talk names, because they're the subject of much fierce debate within the Fire Emblem community. For the longest time, many of us have had to deal with somewhat haphazard fan translations that problems with accuracy and meaning be damned have stuck with many of us, and are pretty hard to let go. Not helping is the fact that a lot of the new official translations from Nintendo are pretty objectively bad. I'm talking names like Quan, which is, if we're going for a more authentic Celtic spelling, should be Kuan, with an accent over the U. This travesty with a Q is Chinese, and I have no idea why they decided to put it in there. And then there's Project Naga's editions. Okay, much love for Book of Holsity, who's done more than their fair share of work to improve the experience of usual players, but yeah, she's just always going to be Fury to me, and that's what I'll refer to her by. So, here's what I'm going to do. When we talk characters, I'll list each of the recognized translations they have and tell you which one I'm going to be using for the series. Yes, that means I'm going to be picking and choosing from different translations, and this will end up pleasing nobody. But I'm an old man when it comes to the Yggdrasil Saga, and you don't want to hear me straining to say See, I literally can't do that one. My brain knows how little sense it makes. Also, in terms of spoilers, I'm not going to delve into specific story bits, but my discussion of some units, chapter events, and whatnot may lead you to infer some spoilery thoughts, so we'll try to avoid that when possible, but you have been warned. So, without further ado, let me welcome you to Genealogy of the Holy War. The world of Genealogy is very different from every other title in the Fire Emblem series, even when compared to the other game in the Yggdrasil Saga, Thracia 776, which you may remember was the previous game I covered. Units play very differently, with even the basic follow-up attack needing a skill to execute. The game is split into 12 large epic chapters instead of 25 to 30 smaller engagements, and there are generational mechanics and awakening and fates borrowed from. It seems like a lot to cover. But unlike Thracia, where you had complicated mechanics mixed with frustrating chapter designs, Genealogy's chapters are pretty tame and quite simple compared to most others in the series, and I don't think you need me or anyone else's help to complete them. With that in mind, this beginner's guide will not be covering explicit chapter strategy. I will point out valuable secrets within chapters such as the Hero Axe and Pursuit Ring, but for the most part this guide will be focused on mechanics, akin to the intro video I made covering Thracia. For this first part of my guide, I'll be going over the differences in battle calculations, weapons, and staffs compared to other entries in the series. For future videos, I will be going over the fixed characters you get in both the first and second generations, the generational mechanics including possible children you can acquire, as well as the effect all the different skills have, the quirks of some chapters with hidden events, obtainable items and other secrets, and then just anything miscellaneous I haven't gone over yet, as I'm basically writing this by the seat of my pants. But that's enough prattle. On to the combat analysis. Genealogy was the first game in the series to introduce the traditional swords, lances, axes, weapon triangle, as well as split up magic into the three anima, light, and dark types, while also giving wind, thunder, and fire magic their own separate triangle. Likely as a result of this, Genealogy was also the first game to make axes a semi-viable weapon type, but they would not take off into their mainstay role we have now until Thracia 776. Yes, I know axes have technically been around since the first game, but they're basically enemy only aside from a couple units in 1 and 3 Book 1, and are enemy only in 3 Book 2, and are only usable when completely unarmed in 2. The reason I say axes would have to wait until Thracia to get their proper role is because the overall balance among the triangle is noticeably skewed in favor of swords and wind magic. The reason being is weight. Nearly all swords weigh 3 to 6, but lances and axes are both much heavier, going from a standard of 12 for lances to 18 for axes. The reason this matters so much is because in Genealogy, weapon weight directly subtracts from your speed stat. So while lances and axes are slowing your units down anywhere from 4 to 6 times compared to most swords, their might is typically only a few points higher in comparison. The only non-swords that really survive this imbalance are the Slim Lance, which has a greatly reduced weight of 6 without sacrificing much power, the Night Killer Lance, which can find some use insta-gibbing cavalry, and the Hero Lance and Axe, as both bring double the power with their double attacks. And the latter even has a reduced weight of 12, which makes it only as heavy as most lances. The only saving grace for lances and axes in this game, aside from the above exceptions, is the comparatively high weapon triangle bonus, coming in at plus and minus 20 hit and avoid, the highest bonus seen in the whole series, without factoring the slight attack and defense bonuses later games would bring. And if you can believe it, the anima magic triangle is even more egregiously unbalanced. Each rank of non-legendary magic within fire, thunder, and wind has the exact same hit and might, with the only differences between them being weight. Wind is the lightest at 2, thunder is middling at 7, while fire is bloated at 12. This means, for all intents and purposes, unless you were engaged in mage-on-mage combat, fire magic is completely useless next to thunder magic, which itself is even more useless compared to wind magic. You will frequently have to make do with the inferior members of the anima cycle on many units because access to tomes is quite limited in Genealogy, but the fact remains that the anima cycle is about as balanced as Modern Warfare 2 was. What? I've played popular games before. As for Dark and Light magic, they don't form a third triangle with anima magic as in Radiant Dawn and Game Boy Advance titles. Instead, they both have the advantage over any anima magic, and are simply neutral towards each other, likely done because dark magic would not become a viable weapon type until Sealed Blade. When it comes to less meta aspects, weapons and staves benefit from a fact of life in Genealogy that would not really be seen again until Fates: practical infinite durability. Oh, everything has a durability value when wielded by you, 50 for nearly everything aside from a single weapon in each utility staff. But what makes most items' durability not matter is that you can repair them at any castle by paying a gold amount equal to the amount of the weapon you have to buy to get its uses up to full. For example, an iron sword in Genealogy costs 1,000 gold, so to repair it from 20 uses back up to the full 50, you'd have to buy the equivalent of another 30 uses worth of iron sword, or in this case, 600 gold. This means that durability only really matters with a few items. Each holy weapon has a value of 50,000, so each use will cost a whopping 1,000 gold to restore, making their deployment potentially costly. Similar but different is the Earth Sword, which demands frequent repairs because of its paltry 10 uses, and also manages to cost 1,000 gold for each use, because of its cost of 10,000. Lastly are most of the staffs. Only the basic heal, mend, and recover staffs have the average 50 uses, with each other utility option having 10 or less uses, in addition to typically possessing a high item cost. Now with all that out of the way, I can discuss actual combat. It generally proceeds like any typical Fire Emblem in its hit, avoid, and damage calculations, except for the following quirks. Firstly, a higher defense than unit's attack will not result in 0 damage. Instead, all attacks will always inflict a minimum of 1 damage unless the Great Shield skill is triggered, as it completely negates attacks. Next is something that is shared among both Yggdrasil games: critical damage. Instead of tripling damage dealt, as with most games, critical hits in Genealogy double the attack stat. For example, if you have 20 attack and your opponent has 15 defense, a Yggdrasil-style crit will double your attack to 40, which ends up dealing 25 damage, rather than a typical tripling of the damage you will deal, which would be 15 in this scenario. If that wasn't enough, just achieving a critical is something that demands detailed explanation in Genealogy, as no other entry deals with it even remotely the same. In regular combat, with normal weapons, units can only obtain a critical if they have the actual skill called critical. Units that have the skill get a base crit rate equal to their skill stack, with exemplary weapons and character supports needed to extend this base rate, or obtain any critical for units lacking their critical skill. For starters, the skill Wrath turns any successful hit into a crit when the user has their HP at 50% or below. Next, the Killer Bow and Holy Sword Mistletoe passively grant the critical skill to their holders, but any weapon can also achieve this ability by obtaining 50 kills, as noted by a number next to a star on the weapon stat screen. Additionally, for every kill earned past 50, a weapon will gain an additional plus 1% to its crit rate, to a maximum of plus 50. But remember this, arena victories do not count towards weapon kill scores. Interestingly, critical hits replace the typical effective damage bonus in Genealogy, so the Slayer weapons, the Armor Slayer against armored units, Night Killer against cavalry, and the Wing Clipper Sword and any bow against flying units will always critical if they successfully hit. Lastly, when a unit initiates a battle while adjacent to a lover or sibling, they will gain a plus 20% crit chance, and you'll actually know if this will succeed in a crit, because a small animation will play out on the map screen before proceeding to the battle. Also worth noting in regards to critical hits is the skill Awareness. Units with the skill cannot have critical hits done against them, which includes the crits that would be inflicted by effective weapons. Well then, that seems like a pretty good place to call it quits for now. I hope you liked this intro video and discussion of combat mechanics. Sorry it's taking so long to get this ball rolling, but I'm feeling pretty good about the frequency of these videos going out. I can't say when the next one will be done, but I'd like to at least get the first generation fully recorded before I put out the second part, so I can at least have demonstrations of all the different skills for you all. Anyway, this has been Model Omega. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.